The smell of sawdust and old coffee filled my father's workshop. I clutched my rolled-up architectural plans, my knuckles white. My brothers, Ryan and Tom, leaned against a workbench, smirking. I took a deep breath and unrolled the drawings on a cleared spot. Dad, look. The old mill on River Road. I've designed a plan to turn it into affordable housing. It could really help the town. Frank Carter wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls and glanced at the plans. Then he laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made the other workers snicker. You? Maggie, you've never built a damn thing worth having in your life. The room fell silent except for the echo of his words. Humiliation burned my cheeks. I slowly re-rolled the plans, my dreams feeling flimsy in my hands. As I turned to leave, he added, "You'll always be a dreamer, never a builder." I reached the door, the tears starting to form. But then I stopped. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, straightened my shoulders, and muttered under my breath, "We'll see about that." Dinner at my family's house was always a showcase for my father's pride. Ryan and Tom, the golden boys, sat beaming as Frank boasted about their latest roofing job. "My boys, carrying on the Carter legacy," he said, clapping them on the back. I sat quietly, pushing my food around my plate. "And you, Maggie," he said, turning his gaze to me. "Still pushing paper around at that office?" That architecture degree was an expensive hobby. I didn't respond. Later, in my old bedroom, I opened my mail. One letter stood out, a development grant opportunity from the town council, specifically for local projects that created affordable housing. My heart raced. This was my chance. But the fine print made my stomach sink. I needed a licensed contractor to co-sign and provide backing. Carter Construction would be perfect. It was the biggest in town. But getting my father to take me seriously felt like an impossible task. I spent all night refining my proposal. The next morning, I walked into my father's office, my heart pounding. "Dad, the town is offering a grant. For the mill project. Your company could be the contractor. It's a solid plan." He barely looked up from his ledger. "Maggie, I don't have time for your fantasy projects. Carter Construction builds real things, not dollhouses." Ryan, who was lounging in a chair, chimed in. "She'd probably use popsicle sticks and glue. You'd tank the Carter name, Megs." The rejection was a physical blow. I walked out of the office, my head held high even as my vision blurred. As I passed the workshop, an older worker, Joe, was sweeping up. He glanced around and leaned close. "That's a damn good plan, Maggie," he whispered. "You should find someone who'll listen." Dejected, I went to the Daily Grind, the town's only decent coffee shop. I was nursing my latte when I overheard a conversation at the next table. A man in a sharp suit was talking about local redevelopment and community investment. My ears perked up. He was the new manager at the regional bank. Gathering every ounce of my courage, I stood and walked over. "Excuse me, I'm Maggie Carter." I couldn't help but overhear. "I have a project that might interest you." I gave him my 2-minute pitch. The manager, Ethan Ross, listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he sipped his coffee. "It's an ambitious idea, Ms. Carter. If you can show me you have the land rights and a licensed contractor, I'll back you." I nodded, my throat tight. "I can do that." I walked away, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. I had neither. I remembered my mother, before she passed, talking about her family's history with the town. I drove to her old storage unit, which I'd been avoiding for years. Dust motes danced in the dim light as I opened cardboard boxes filled with memories. Beneath a stack of photo albums, I found a faded manila folder. Inside was a deed. My breath caught. The abandoned mill site had been owned by my grandmother. It had lapsed into foreclosure years ago after she died, but according to a recent notice clipped to the deed, the town was selling the property to settle back taxes. It was available. It was mine by heritage. I made a decision. I drove straight to the town clerk's office. I signed the purchase papers, my hand trembling only slightly as I drained my entire life savings to pay for it. The land was now mine. My small apartment became my war room. While my father and brothers were out on loud job sites, I worked in quiet focus. Night after night, I sketched new blueprints, improved the designs, and calculated every cost for materials and labor. I bought specialized software and taught myself how to use it. Empty coffee cups piled up next to stacks of supplier quotes. The contrast was stark. Frank Carter was loud and boastful about his conventional projects, while his daughter was silently building a revolution from her kitchen table. I was so absorbed in my work, I didn't hear the knock at first. The second one was louder, more insistent. I hurriedly tried to cover my plans just as the door opened. It was my brother, Ryan. "Hey, Megs, Dad wants to know if you..." His voice trailed off as his eyes landed on the detailed drawings spread across my table. Ryan pretended he'd just stopped by to say hello, but his eyes kept darting to my blueprints. He left after a few minutes of awkward conversation. I thought nothing of it. A week later, I was delivering paperwork to the town hall for my permit application when I saw a crowd in the main chamber. I peeked in. There was my father, standing at a podium with my brothers. On a large screen behind them was a presentation. My heart stopped. It was my mill design. Slightly altered, with different color schemes, but undeniably mine. Frank was pitching it to the Chamber of Commerce as a new Carter construction initiative. I felt dizzy. He had stolen my dream. I leaned against the cool wall, listening to him use my words, my ideas. He finished to a round of applause. He had taken everything. I couldn't let it stand. I pushed through the crowd, my anger overriding my fear. "That's my design," I said, my voice shaking. The room went quiet. Frank turned, a smug smile on his face. "Maggie, don't make a scene. It's business. You weren't gonna do anything with it anyway." The crowd's sympathetic murmurs felt worse than their laughter. Humiliation burned through me. I couldn't breathe. I turned and rushed out of the hall, blinded by tears of rage. I nearly collided with someone on the steps. "Whoa, easy there," a familiar voice said. I looked up. It was Ethan Ross, the bank manager. He looked from my distraught face back toward the hall. He understood instantly. "Let's make your version happen," he said quietly. Without them. Ethan became my secret weapon. He helped me form my own company, an LLC I named Carter Design and Build. He also gave me a list of local subcontractors. I sought out the ones my father had underpaid or mistreated over the years. They were hesitant at first, but when they saw my detailed plans and Ethan's backing, they agreed. We broke ground on a small, vacant lot on the edge of town. It wasn't the mill yet, but a prototype for one of the housing units. We worked quietly, early in the mornings and on weekends. My father was so busy boasting about his new mill project, he didn't notice the small construction site slowly taking shape on the other side of town. He thought I'd given up and gone back to my desk job. Word eventually got out. Frank Carter's daughter was building something. The smirk fell from his face, replaced by cold fury. His retaliation was swift. City inspectors showed up at my site daily, sent by anonymous tips. My permits were suddenly flagged for review. My father had friends in every office. But I was prepared. I had followed every code, dotted every I, crossed every T. I met each inspector with a calm smile and a binder full of compliant documentation. The final inspection was for the foundation. The head inspector, a stern man, went over everything with a fine-tooth comb. He finally closed his clipboard. "Passes. Better work than I see on most sites." The next day, the local paper ran a small piece about the new housing prototype, praising my professionalism and attention to detail. It was my first public victory. Meanwhile, cracks were appearing in my father's foundation. His copied mill project was behind schedule and over budget. I heard through the grapevine that workers were growing frustrated with his old-fashioned, demanding ways. A few started quietly leaving his crew. Joe, the sympathetic worker, was the first to approach me. "Got any room for an experienced hand, Maggie?" Soon, a trickle became a stream. My site was efficient, respectful, and well-run. My father was losing his best people. One afternoon, my brother Tom stormed into Frank's office. He'd just gotten off the phone with a major client. "They're pulling out. They said there's bad press about us stealing a woman's design." The day my prototype home was completed, it felt like a miracle. It was simple, beautiful, and energy efficient. I invited the local journalists for a tour. They came, and the story wasn't just about a house, it was about the female-led company transforming forgotten spaces. The article featured a picture of me standing proudly in front of the home. My father was interviewed for a rebuttal. He scoffed on camera, calling my project a nice piece of charity work, dismissing it as insignificant. But people were paying attention. Later that day, Ethan called me, his voice buzzing with excitement. He had shown the article to his contacts. "Maggie, pack your bags. You're pitching at the Regional Development Board meeting next week." The boardroom was intimidating, all polished wood and serious faces. I stood before a dozen executives, my presentation glowing on the screen behind me. I talked about community, sustainability, and smart design. I was calm, confident, and my voice never wavered. When I finished, a stern-looking woman at the head of the table leaned forward. "It's an impressive vision, Ms. Carter. But can you handle large-scale operations? This mill project is a multi-million-dollar endeavor." My mouth went dry. This was the moment. Ethan, who was sitting beside me, smoothly slid a folder across the table to her. "She already has," he said. Inside was proof, completed permits, signed partnerships with subcontractors, and photos of my successful prototype. The board members looked at each other, nodding slowly. The news broke like a thunderclap. Maggie Carter's redevelopment plan for the old mill had been awarded state funding. It was the lead story. I was at my site when my phone started blowing up. The first call was from my father. I didn't answer. He left a screaming voicemail, accusing me of stealing his clients, his ideas, his legacy. His rage was a tangible thing. I felt a pang of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. I had earned this. The following morning, an official-looking envelope was delivered to my door. It was a legal notice. Frank Carter was suing me, claiming intellectual property theft and trying to get an injunction to halt my project. The courtroom was quiet and tense. My father's lawyer presented his blueprints, claiming they proved the design was original to Carter Construction. My father sat smugly, sure of his victory. Then it was my lawyer's turn. He presented my evidence, digital timestamps on my computer files from months before Ryan ever saw my plans. Early drafts, email correspondence with suppliers, and the original grant proposal I had shown my father. The proof was undeniable. The judge didn't take long to decide. He dismissed the case, stating it was abundantly clear where the intellectual property originated. My father's name, built on a reputation of toughness, was now publicly associated with shame and theft. The town's attitude shifted completely. Neighbors I barely knew stopped me in the street to congratulate me. Former employees from my dad's company started showing up at my site, asking for applications. Carter Construction was crumbling under the weight of its own bad reputation and financial mismanagement. Then, I got a call from the mayor's office. The city had a stalled community center project. The original contractor, Carter Construction, had been fired for delays. They were offering the contract to me to finish the job. It was the ultimate insult to my father. I took a deep breath and accepted. I was at the community center site when my father's truck screeched to a halt outside the fence. He stormed in, his face purple with rage. You think you can steal my legacy? Everything I built. He was screaming, spittle flying from his lips. My worker stopped and watched. I stood my ground, perfectly calm. I didn't steal your legacy, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I built mine. At that moment, I noticed a reporter from the local paper, who had been covering the project, quickly taking photos. The next day, the paper ran a picture that said it all. Frank Carter, wild-eyed and yelling, while his daughter stood poised and unshaken. With the community center and the mill project running simultaneously, my company was a hive of positive activity. I made sure my workers were respected, paid on time, and had good conditions. Morale was sky-high, and the work reflected it. The structures rose quickly, a testament to good planning and a happy team. One afternoon, Ethan found me on site, a wide grin on his face. Maggie, the regional bank manager, Arthur Wright, wants to meet you in person. He's heard all about your success and wants to discuss expansion funding for the entire county. This was bigger than I had ever dreamed. While my star was rising, my father's world was collapsing. The bank he'd used for decades called in his business loans. His company, drowning in debt and with no new clients, officially filed for bankruptcy. I heard through Tom that he was in deep trouble. His house, his tools, even his truck were all used as collateral. He was about to lose everything. In a final, desperate move, he went to see his old friend, the bank manager who had backed him for years. The man listened patiently as Frank pleaded for more time. He then shook his head. I'm sorry, Frank. It's over. Your daughter's company outperformed you. She's the better investment. The door had been firmly closed. The day of the mill's grand opening was sunny and bright. The old brick building was now transformed, with clean windows and fresh paint, housing 20 beautiful, affordable units. The whole town seemed to have gathered for the ceremony. I stood at a podium, ready to give my speech. I hadn't invited my father. But as I scanned the crowd, I saw him. He was standing at the very back, under a tree, his shoulders slumped. I took a deep breath and began my speech, thanking everyone who had helped. Midway through, a sleek black car pulled up. Everyone turned to watch as Arthur Wright, the regional bank manager, stepped out. He walked straight to the podium and politely asked to speak to the project owner. The crowd fell silent. Mr. Wright shook my hand firmly, his grip strong. He turned slightly to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly. Ms. Carter, on behalf of the bank, I want to congratulate you. You had a vision, and you executed it with remarkable skill and integrity. He paused, looking directly at me. You built something truly worth having. The words hung in the air. They were my father's words, thrown back at him by fate. I glanced toward the tree. My father was staring, frozen, his face a mask of stunned realization. The crowd erupted into applause. I didn't look at him with spite, but with a calm, quiet triumph. I had proven him wrong in the most public way possible. My father slipped away before the ceremony ended. The celebration continued without him. The next morning, the newspaper headline said it all. Carter Design named Regional Builder of the Year. I learned from Tom that after the opening, he and Ryan had confronted our father at home. They blamed him for his stubbornness, for his pride, for ruining the family business. I felt a distant sadness, but no guilt. I had not set out to destroy him, only to build myself. The silence from his side of town was all the confirmation I needed. I had won. Weeks passed. My company was busy with new projects. One afternoon, my assistant said I had a visitor. I walked out to the reception area and stopped. It was my father. He looked older, holding his worn cap in his hands. Maggie, he began, his voice rough. The business, it's gone. Maybe we could. I don't know, work together again? He couldn't meet my eyes. I felt a complex mix of pity and residual hurt. I hesitated, then made a decision. I can't partner with you, Dad, I said gently. But I can offer you a job. A foreman on the new library project. It was a fair offer, but it was an offer from a boss to an employee. His pride couldn't take it. He shook his head, turned, and walked out. I felt a final chapter close. Ethan stopped by with a bottle of champagne. Investors are lining up, Maggie. They want you to lead redevelopment projects across the whole state. It was overwhelming and incredible. That evening, I drove to the cemetery. I sat by my mother's headstone, placing a small stone on top. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "For the deed, and for everything." I looked out from the hilltop. In the distance, I could see the old mill, its windows now glowing with warm, welcoming light. It was no longer a symbol of decay, but a beacon of what I had accomplished. It was my triumph, etched into the town's skyline. Carter Design and Build thrived. We became known for innovative, community-focused projects. One day, a young girl from the town, maybe 16, came to my office for a school mentorship program. She was shy, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. As I showed her some blueprints, she gathered her courage and asked, "Did your dad ever say he was sorry for what he said?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled a genuine, peaceful smile. "He didn't have to," I told her. "The work says it for me." She finally built something worth having, herself.